We are happy and proud to present today's webinar in our continuing series and are privileged to have with us today Dr. Manoj Kumar Sharma and Dr. Nitin Anand as our speakers. To introduce the speakers, Dr. Manoj Kumar Sharma is a professor of clinical psychology, National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences, Bangalore. He's also a coordinator of SHUT Clinic, which is India's first tech de-addiction clinic. Dr. Sharma is a member of World Health Organization expert on addictive behaviors, Lancet advisory member on public health on gambling too. Also has many awareness articles and publications to his credit at national and international level. His areas of interest includes behavioral addiction, technology addiction, assessments, and intervention for its management. On behalf of all gathered here, a very hearty welcome to Dr. Sharma.
Thank you. Thank you.
We are also joined by Dr. Nitin, Associate Professor of Clinical Psychology and Consultant Obsessive Compulsive Disorder Clinic, National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences, Bangalore. He's also the consultant with the SHUT Clinic, that is Service for Healthy Use of Technology, as mentioned earlier, India's first tech de-addiction clinic. His areas of interest includes psychotherapeutic management of internet addiction, promotion of healthy use of internet, among the adults, development of psychological assessments, and he too has published many articles in the national and international journals. On behalf of all gathered here, I welcome, a warm welcome to you, Dr. Nitin. This is a very short introduction, and both of them have done extensive work in their respective fields. Each of them will present for about 15 to 20 minutes, followed by a Q&A session. I request the participants to keep the audio mute and video off during the webinar. You may post your questions and comments in the chat box. We will address them during the question and answer session after the speakers have made their presentation. Now, I request Dr. Sharma to take over and share your valuable inputs. Thank you.
Thank you, Shahida, and thank you, Samagra, for inviting me to share my work and perspective in the area of technology addiction. And I'm going to briefly touch upon why we need to know about healthy use of technology and why there is a need to promote safe screen use. And I think my other colleagues, Dr. Nitin Anand, will talk about the management and other aspects of technology use. So, as I was introduced, I think SHUT Clinic is India's first tech de-addiction clinic. And when we started this clinic in 2014, it was well appreciated in India as well as internationally. And British Medical Journal carried out an article on the initiative of NIMHANS in the area of technology addiction. But this was 2014, but I think after the lockdown has come, I think because of lockdown related restrictions, as well as the other demands, technology use has increased for professional purpose, and technology use has become a leisure activities, because now myself and Dr. Nitin, earlier we used to work on leisure activities and promotion of leisure activities for our clientele, but now we are working on how to educate them for digital leisure activities, because everything has become digital now. And if it has become leisure activities has become digital, automatically it contributes to excessive use of technology. And sometimes there is a spectrum. It has a productive side to problematic side, where it start affecting your lifestyle, where it start affecting your day-to-day activities, as well as it also predispose certain people or group of people for developing addiction also. Till now, only gaming has become a clinical condition, but other technology related use also comes in the domain of psychoeducation, also comes in the domain of psychotherapy. So I think this is the century of stress, and I think this is also called the century of age of screens, because I think this is what people have talked about when they worked on the increased use of digital technology for work as well as for other domain of mass communication. And this is 2020 reports, when I think we were in the lockdown phase, This is a Nielsen survey which says that we are spending more than 13 hours a day on screen, a significant increase from 10 hours a day a year ago in 2019. So if you see, this increase has come, and this increase sometime it has come brought the terms of, like earlier we used to talk about binge drinking in alcoholism, but now we are talking about binge watching also and binge gaming also. When we are talking about binge watching, it says that if you use the screen for more than 120 minutes in one go, then you are meeting that criteria of binge watching. And if you are playing games, because that's become a concern also during the COVID time, that adolescent and the young adults are spending too much time on gaming. But if they are playing for more than 5 hours or 6 hours at a stretch, then they are meeting the criteria of binge gaming, which somewhere has a association with psychological factors also. When we talk about binge, then it comes under that terms which we call, person may have impulsivity, person may have other psychological predisposition also, which promoting excessive or binge watching. Still, if we know that how this knockdown period has affected us, I think this is the recent survey of 2021, where it has said that Indians on an average are using 6 hours, spending 6 hours on internet, and which has shown highest correlation between screen time use and increased vision loss and eyesight deterioration, which is generally a common health concern, and this is a part of our psychoeducational program also for safe use of screen. So that's why I think, if you say, though everything is online in today's time, but I think definitely we have to be remain sensitive. Is it my affecting my physical health, or am I using because of to fulfillment of certain psychological needs? But it all contributes to biopsychosocial dysfunctions. This is another study which has been again carried out during COVID time. It says that university students are spending almost 10 hours per day during the lockdown period, which again, sometimes it may be for professional purpose or for academic, but rest of the time it is for relaxation, because there is nothing to enjoy. So sometimes it is okay to enjoy, relax with technology, but if it's become a compulsive habit, then it's a concern. And increased screen time is also associated with increased rates of obesity, and it has an association with psychological symptoms also.
So, excuse me, can you please make your screen full screen, sir?
Yeah.
Slideshow view.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So now these are the various factors which are associated with screen use. I think if you say, how does the screen use affects one side, definitely it has an impact on quality of life. It has an impact on your productivity, which may be job, it could be academics, it could be professional. But common symptoms which are seen is eye symptoms. Long hours of screen use brings eye strain, because sometimes we have seen in a normal conversation, normal interaction, we blink our eyes almost 10 times a minute. But I think once we start using screen, the blinking frequencies comes down, which contributes to eye strain, which contributes to irritation, dry eyes, and sometimes it can be because of people are spending more time on mobile based devices where the screen is small and you have to concentrate a lot. It's again contribute to eye strain, eye related issues. But what are the various impact of screen use? I would say life satisfaction, it goes in both ways. One, definitely sometimes if it is using for professional purpose, productive purpose, it will bring life satisfaction. But if it is taking away a lot of your time, which is distracting you from your professional duties and from your academic things, it brings low life satisfaction. Then comes the various biopsychosocial symptoms. When I'm talking about biopsychosocial system, like because of screen use nowadays, people are talking about webinar fatigue, where long hours of webinars meeting contribute to fatigueness, contributes to feeling of exhaustion, which further contributes to lack of initiativeness. There may be other terms which is more or less is extension of fatigue is digital burnout, again, which may happen among students also, because if they're attending online classes for X number of hours without any breaks, without any use of any relaxation techniques. It may contribute to digital burnouts also, or it may contribute to overall fatigue and pain also. And then it also comes academic satisfaction, because nowadays when we use screen, there is a concept called background listening. When we are attending any focus task, we keep doing a lot of other things also on the screen. We are doing, along with the professional work, we are also attending social media, we are also active on chats. So it has been seen that if your mind get distracted when you are doing any focus task, if your brain get distracted for other task also, so brain takes almost 3 to 5 minutes to reach back to the same concentration level. So if you are distracting yourself for XYZ activities during any focus task, definitely it will impact your retention as well as productivity for academic work or for any professional purpose. So sometimes children or the adolescent young adults say that we are working, but the productivity is not up to our expectation. Maybe I think that the cause is they are getting distracted because of these background activities, and again it will have a further impact on academics and other things, and which may further contribute to obesity, fatigue, and decreased physical activities. Because if you see, uh, in recent time, because of restriction, because of earlier also, the screen use has led to reduction in indulgence in screen physical based activities among the adolescent and young adults, which has contributed to other health issues. So all these issues promote that we have to take a conscious call that we have to work on our technology use. So these are like various impacts of technology use. Like people have said, uh, like screen use is associated with sleep. This is in 2020, and they have said that aggregate screen time across all devices almost 17 hours per day, and heavy users reported least healthful dietary patterns, poorest health related characteristics. In another studies, it has been seen eye strain has been commonly seen in 23% of the sample, irritability and increased use of glasses. In another cross-sectional surveys, 82% of the population reported sedentary behaviors during recreational use if it is more than 3 hours. And another survey which says that total screen time for a month has increased up to 38, almost 39 hours, and the longer screen time is associated with shorter sleep duration and higher body pain. And total screen time for participant in another survey has set for 9 hours. If you see across studies have documenting one common theme that our screen use has increased. And we are also facing physical and other psychological issues because of screen use. How the screen use has affected your well-being. People have said that in one review, it has been suggested that increased screen use leads to sedentary lifestyle, no physical activities, no communication, and spending time in front of the screen. It also increases the risk for depression, and it also has low physical quality and poor quality of life. And in another cross-sectional survey in 2020, it has been seen that during compared to pre-lockdown phase, participants reported 10 hours of screen use, almost 20% increase in daytime sleepiness, depressive symptomatology. This has become a very common theme. Most of the parents are concerned because the child and the young adults are waking up around 12 o'clock if there are no online classes. Even if there is online classes, they are sleeping while attending the online classes. And another review will say that screen use has a high association with low mood state, high stress, and increased irritability. Sometimes these psychological symptoms can be the reason for high screen use, and sometimes these symptoms can be the result of high screen use. So that vary from individual to individual. But why do we need the healthy screen time? Because some of the studies which has come recently, and where this is the first study which we have done from NIMANS, it has shows that if you have a mild use of technology, it has a better impact on your cognitive performance, which includes your attention, which includes your decreased distractibility, as well as speed of processing. Another study which is a cross-sectional design, it has shown that Mild use is related with improving skill for work and increased productivity. And the mild use also has a better impact on education, learning, communication, and entertainment. And the last study which has been documented, it says that mild user has a better productivity and performance as compared to problematic and severe user. So it's mean we have to see whether if it is start affecting your biopsychosocial functioning, there is always a conscious call you have to take to reduce your use so that you can remain productive. These are some of the recommendations based because of our screen use. This recommendation has come from American Association of Pediatricians and WHO. Both have, but this is all for children's. For young adults, we are now working on it. Maybe in another 1 or 2 years, we will be able to come with recommendation. But for young adults, this recommendation or adolescent, these recommendations works well. Like for children's below 18 months, avoid screen-based media. For children's 18 to 24 months.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma, for that informative and well-explained session. Due to technical glitches, we missed the last part of it. And now over to Dr. Nitin Anand for his presentations.
Hello, are you able to see my slides?
Yes, Dr. Nitin.
Yeah, there is a, I think, Nimhans, I think there is a slight fluctuation in the internet connection just now. So
okay.
We are finding it slightly difficult.
Okay.
Are you able to hear me as well?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, I think what I'll do is I will just keep my video off because I think there is a fluctuation in the internet connection. I can see the speed going low.
Okay, okay.
The interest of that, my voice is clear at your end.
Yeah, it is clear now.
Okay.
Thank you, doctor. Yeah, you may carry on.
So I would just like to continue where Dr. Manoj has left from. I'll just try to summarize in a few slides. I think these internet use addictive behaviors become addictions when grossly in broader terms, when they start disrupting real life, that is when they start disrupting your school or academic performance, occupational work, real life relationship, activities of daily living, difficulties in maintaining a sleep schedule, in meal timings getting delayed, when self-hygiene levels drop. So these are grosser areas. When these things start happening, it's a clear indication that internet use behaviors are slightly taking characteristics which could be considered as addictive by nature. So yeah, what I'm trying to hint here at that how the internet is impacting internet use, how the use of internet is actually impacting life. So if you can see that initially the time which we had for self, for skill learning, for family, for hobbies, for relaxation, and for even any other kind of goals, they are slowly getting compromised. You can see these circles, and if you can see that constant internet connectivity, having a persistent online presence, constantly checking the status, updating our status on social networking sites, and even on other platforms, and use of technological devices. It started with maybe laptops, iPads, smartphones, notebooks. Those two circles are slowly intruding into this circle, which is there for self, family, hobbies, and skills. And the more it intrudes, and the more lesser and lesser time we have for ourselves and our near and dear ones, and it is going to start impacting many things in our life. And that is an area, and that when it starts happening, it's a clear indication that these internet use behaviors have tried to slowly have come up with the addictive nature, or addictive characteristics are being acquired by these behaviors. Just to give a brief overview about the prevalence rates, it is called as internet addictive use, is technically known as problematic internet use. You can see that the prevalence range rates from 6% to somewhere around 25%, and primarily majority of these studies have been done in Southeast Asian countries, and even China in the year 2008, they have acknowledged that because of the consistent higher prevalence rates, they have actually acknowledged and classified as an official disorder. Internet addiction is classified as an official disorder in China. When it comes to social networking sites use, what we see is the prevalence rate ranges somewhere between 1 to 12%. The most comprehensive and community-based intervention, community-based sample collection which was done was around 4.5%. It indicated in Hungary. Primarily, there is high level of social networking sites used in North America and Europe, which are being ranked the highest, and the most commonly used internet platforms for social media usage are YouTube, Instagram, and Snapchat. When we come towards some of the prevalence data from India, that is from NIMHANS Fresh Shut Clinic, we did this data collection on 2,700 individuals, 18 and above, and gender distribution was nearly equal in this community-based study, and we found that 1% is the addictive use for internet, 4% for mobile phone addiction, 3.5% for social networking use, shopping, gambling addiction was around 1%, and video game addiction was found to be around 7%. Though there are lower scores for 0.2 for pornography, but these are underestimates, as we do not believe that it is a correct representation. And this representation in this survey has come down due to many number of other associated factors. Just going briefly over a number of syndromes which exist because of excessive use of technology and internet use. One of the common ones is what we found is text neck syndrome, that is extensive texting or WhatsApping can result in the stress in spine and can cause inflation to the pain, to the spine and pain and spasm. So you can see that if we have a 0-degree tilt, the head weight weighs somewhere around 4 to 5.5 kgs, but as a tilt increases to around 60 degrees, on the extreme right, you can see it increases to around 27 kgs. And if we utilize it for, as per the available data, that now during lockdown, we are nearly spending around 6 hours in this position, or even more than that, then this is going to have an impact. And many of the individuals, and especially young adults, adolescents, have come up with these set of difficulties which come in the physical domain. We have also found that upcoming phenomena is nomophobia, where the data says that, India data says that around a moderate to nomophobia is found in around 42% individuals, with severe being around 15% of individuals. Even medical students, the study indicated that medical students also had nomophobia, and where males are again outnumbering the females, 86 to 77%. Severe nomophobia was found in around 20% of these males, and this is data from India. This is another phenomenon called as a fear of missing out, that is the missing out on a social event or a social opportunity. And this is a constant apprehension that others might be having more rewarding experiences in their life from which an individual is absent. And at times, individuals who have social anxiety, in some of those individuals, there is no clear data, but in those individuals, FOMO is understood to be slightly more prevalent. Then there is digital amnesia, another phenomenon which has been found is individuals find it very difficult now these days, or they are not really interested in remembering facts or in any information. 50% of the participants said this. This is in the public domain. 73% of the participants say that they use phones for primarily to connecting to the internet, and this loss of phone will be catastrophic. They will not know what is to be done and what is their schedule like, what are their names, numbers of people, or a numerous number of other details. What was suggested here is gadget hygiene should be made a habit, and we'll see in the subsequent slides how this comes out, how this can be addressed. Facebook depression, or we can also call it as social media depression. It has been found that 50% of adolescents who log on to social media nearly numerous number of times, minimum at least 2 to 3 times in a day. And it has been found that individuals who engage in excessive use of social media find it difficult to basically keep their moods or keep their affect state in a more self-regulated manner, because they engage in what we call as upregulation, or sorry, they in upper comparison they engage in, where they constantly compare themselves with others or the profiles of others whom they see on these social media platforms, and a result of which they become unhappy, thinking that others' lives are more happier, other people are achieving more than them, And this constant comparison in addition to having poor coping skills, spiral into slowly depression, hopelessness, and at times even loneliness. India has also been understood whether as a selfie debt capital of the world. So the recent literature which has been published also indicates that it is the selfie debt capital of the world. If we look at this data, so the data indicates that numerous number of individuals are there, and the highest number of individuals are located in India. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Sorry. So highest number of deaths have been found in India. So 259 people were killed between these 6 years, and the mean age was 22. Majority of them were males. In 118 were the deaths, and the most likely reasons were of drowning, during transport and from a fall. So India is officially the debt capital of the world as per this published data. Moving on to quickly some of the risk factors which are there. The risk factors which are there indicate that having a male gender or residing in an urban metropolitan area, having lower levels of parental involvement, unpleasant parent-child relationships, and negative peer relationships are indicators as risk factors for problematic internet use. In terms of social networking sites use, it has been found that more the adolescent girls than boys are at risk. Individuals or adolescents who have higher levels of extroversion, those who have high levels of anxiety levels and have more needs for affection, acknowledgement, appreciation are the ones who are at risk. In terms of mental health comorbidity, they have been found that individuals who have depression, anxiety, and stress, they are the ones who are more at risk. Moving ahead, we'll go to the intervention. In terms of cognitive behavioral therapies have been found to be the most effective because they have been indicated that they have been effective in treating substance use and emotional disorders. That's the reason why CBT has been indicated as of use for internet addiction as well, as internet addiction has a compulsive nature, which has similarity to other disorders which have been successfully treated with CBT. The primary goals of CBT include minimizing the intrusion of technology into time for self and family, ensuring the survival of skill-based activities, improving impulse control, maintaining improvements over time, and also very crucially in terms of how to engage in healthy use of technology. So initially overview they use to give assessments. We will assess and about the pattern which each individual has about the use of internet behaviors. We can identify the problematic online behaviors, total duration, frequency of internet use, the course of these use of these behaviors, in which are the situations which lead to the excessive use of internet use behaviors, which are the factors which lead to the minimize the use of internet, and what are the purposeful uses of internet which they are engaging in a day. On the other end, we also would examine and analyze what are the non-internet use behaviors an individual is engaging in terms of offline time which they are spending at work, in academics, with family, with friends, in skill learning, in playing sports, and also in biological functioning, including sleep and maintaining meal timings. Once we get this, we move on to the next step. We can utilize some of these tools which we utilize at our clinic for identifying excessive use of internet, social media, excessive internet gaming, gambling, pornography use, and smartphone addiction as well. So these are some of the assessments which we use at the clinic. When we have done the assessments, what we usually do, we move on to the intervention phase, where the primary goals are to ensure that the younger adolescents and adults, they are acknowledged, they use, they try to basically understand that they need to take help, and they take the ownership of the problematic use which they're engaging in. And because that gives us a pathway to overcome online preoccupation, and then we focus on some of the behavioral modification strategies as well. So in this case, when we are going to start here, these are all the difficulties which they usually come up with. So here we usually start with identifying the triggering situations which lead to logging online, type of activity which they engage in, the length of each online binge which is there, tracking the outcome of the internet binge which is there, what actions get completed, what activities were interrupted when they were offline, or what are the feelings they experienced after each of these online sessions which they engage in. This helps us to, or the treating therapist, to establish a baseline of the kind of profile they have, that identifies the high risk situations in which they which lead them to actually log on to internet use behaviors, and also helps us to set up the goals for the treatment. Initially, we will focus on what we call as smartphone restructuring, where we primarily educate them on how basically they can restructure the devices which they're actually using to go on to these online social networking platforms or any other kind of internet use behaviors. It could be deleting a set of bookmarks, favorite files or websites. So that will help in removing these cues, using any filtering softwares which helps them, gives them an opportunity to regulate their online use and become more aware about the same. Scheduling frequent breaks from use of smartphones at regular intervals, and also at times to minimize the speed of the internet. When we also need to identify the triggers for them, especially which can be very specific to each individuals as to when it happened. A few examples are when it usually the excessive use starts when they are alone at home, when they are feeling bored, when they have had an argument with their family or friends, when they are having no plan for the evening, means they are feeling bored, or they are do not want to engage in completion of any academic activities or tasks. So at times, to procrastinate or to distract themselves, this online use of activities starts. And because the consideration here is to know that if we can delay the use, then the urges for engaging in initiating this online use, which slowly becomes problematic, can be managed slightly better. This is the start-stop cycle which has been proposed by Young, and I will take you through this. This usually happens with a number of young adults and adolescents. How this entire cycle starts. This starts with a number of rationalizations which lead to the triggering of this episode. This is followed by a pattern of regret, which leads to abstinence, or they stay away from excessive use of internet, and then ultimately a relapse takes place. So usually rationalizations are this behavior is harmless, or this behavior is okay. Just a few minutes. These are the internal cognitive statements which they harbor, which go use as rationalizations. I work hard, I deserve it, I can control my use of internet, and the computer relaxes me. So these are the verbalizations which initiate the use, and once the use happens, they spend nearly maybe an hour, 2 hours, or even more than that. And at the end of it, they realize that a lot of time has passed by, and it makes them even more anxious and more worried about the uncompleted tasks. As a result of it, the next phase is of regret, where the user experiences a period of deep regret, and they have thoughts, oh, I can't believe I wasted all my time. I know this is going to hurt my academics or my job performance, and the work is still not finished, and it makes them feel guilty. Once they regret, it sets on to the next stage, where they basically promise to stop this behavior. That is where abstinence happens. They view this as a personal failure of their willpower and promise never to do it again. And they have these thoughts on abstinence. They try to focus more on offline hobbies. They spend time on skill building. They work diligently, and they also try to spend time with their family and friends. But this abstinence usually in the background of underlying emotional issues or another cognitive distortions is short-lived, and a relapse happens. Whenever a stressful event occurs or any emotionally charged moments are there, the craving for those online experiences increases. They recall those effects of when they were online, either engaging in social networking use, internet use, browsing, binging on web series or internet gaming. What kind of effects it gave? It was exciting, it was relaxing, It led to the change of mood, and as a result of which the guilt-ridden experiences which led to the abstinence decline, and ultimately a trigger of these, they trigger the rationalizations which we saw in the initial slide, and it ultimately leads them to start the use again. So this is how which will complete the cycle. I'll skip this. This is how it completes the cycle, starting from rationalization and ends again at rationalization. And we need to break this pattern in the therapeutic work which we do with our clients at the clinic about this. So self-awareness is very crucial. Then acknowledgement is the second phase. Third is acceptance, when they become willing to actually work on many of these problems. Some of them, just to give a glimpse, they have irrational cognitions or errors like black and white thinking. They feel that I'm worthless offline, but in the online world, I'm someone. Nobody loves me offline. The online gaming world is the only place where I get respected. So in therapy, we work on some of these irrational cognitions or errors by challenging some of these rationalizations. So the use becomes more mild in nature, or a moderated use of their internet becomes. Once we briefly, I will share that once they attain substantial amounts of improvements, we also work on ensuring that they're able to maintain these improvements. And we work on these areas by ensuring if they have any other comorbid, other mental health concerns like anxiety, depression, or social anxiety, low self-esteem, difficulties in managing their emotions, any IPR problems which are usually there with the adolescents, young adults, any marital relationship difficulties are there. So then we work on them so that simultaneously, then if these get corrected, then the chances of relapse decrease. Because we believe, and it has been proven with research, that internet usually offers a very convenient distraction from these problems. And usually it is not a solution for problems in the real life. I will just skip over this. This is some internet-based data which is there, which shares that CBT is actually more effective in reducing the excessive use of internet. This is for problematic internet use and problematic social media use. These are the research findings. And also for gaming, just to briefly share with you that it indicates that CBT is usually more effective than other non-medication conditions. Lastly, I would like to share that those are intervention strategies, but we also need to focus, as Dr. Manoj has already shared, that we need to focus on the strategies for healthy use. So these are some of the skills which we can use, like digital hygiene skills, which we'll call the concept of phone basket. That is, all individuals in the family can actually they can decide a time in the evening that after that particular time, the phone goes into the phone basket, and then they actually focus on spending time with each other. That is, spending time in an offline format. Try to keep the notifications in the silent mode. See if they can minimize and regulate the use of social media platforms like WhatsApp or Telegram or other things once in few hours. Try to see if you can use have smartphone free activities once in every 3 to 4 hours in a day. See if you can plan digital fasting on a Sunday or on another day, which is where you have an off and where you can engage in offline activities. Bedroom and study rooms are to be considered as no phone zones. So these are just an overview of some of the digital hygiene skills which can be used for development of healthy use of technology, and these are more preventive in nature. Okay. With this, I will like to end. There are many things, but we can take up during the discussion, question and answer session. These are some of the recent publications from the Shat Clinic, and most of these details are available on this link. You can go to ResearchGate and have a look at the ResearchGate for Dr. Manoj and myself, and you'll get these list of publications there as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nitin, for the valuable inputs on identifying the tech addiction, the patterns it's playing out, and the ways to manage. Thank you. And as we proceed to the question and answer sessions, we have received few questions. And as we proceed to the question and answer session, I request the participants to kindly record your inputs in the feedback form, which will be shared in the chat box. Thank you. We'll go for the questions. I'll read out the questions which has come. Any one of you could choose to answer. Yeah, the first question is, what are the hazards of binge watching? Dr. Nitin, it mentions, how difficult is it going to be for the students to return to the physical offline classes once they return to school? What is the alternative?
And I think the first hazards of binge watching also has a relationship with the psychological issues also. Like sometimes binge watching do manifest as a coping behavior. Binge watching is a part of experience seeking, and binge watching is a part of manifestation of impulsivity. So that I think we have to see which factor is working for you, and then its implications will be different for different users and all. So that's one thing. But binge watching is a concern for us if you are engaging in this kind of behavior. Second, like once we go into the offline mode and once the restriction become better off, definitely it will be a challenge because the schedule will be different, and schedule will involve a lot of other activities where these kind of leisure and digital leisure activities will not be there. So that may sometimes trigger desire to go back, desire to spend time on digital based activities, and sometimes so these desires may bring some distraction, may leads to some procrastination, or may leads to postponement of physical activity, because if they're offline classes, once you reach home there will be a tendency, let me spend some time. I the whole day I was attending college. It's like a similar thing for working class also. They are productive 9 to 6 or 7, then they will say I would do streaming in the night because night is for me. But whatever you are saying it is for me may have an impact on your psychological health, may have an impact on other things. So try to have a balance of offline activities also, bring as many offline activities possible, and try to see that technology should not lead to repeated procrastination for any kind of important work. Technology use should not lead to disturbance in initiation of sleep. Technology use should not interfere with the physical activities or communication with others. I think these are the four broad domains. If you work on it, definitely it will be a challenge, but if you bring a balance, it will be a, you will be in the safe zone and you will enjoy technology and you will be more productive with technology. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma, for that valuable inputs. Balancing is the key, and we need to be mindful of the amount of hours spending and on quality time with the physical and non-physical activities, and also online and offline works. Thank you, Doctor. It's another question. Many parents are concerned about aggressive behavior in children due to exposure to online games. How can parents mitigate this?
Nitin, would you like to answer? So I think because sometimes there is no still empirical evidence has to come whether exposure to this violent game become a causal factor for increased aggressiveness. But in some of the children and adolescents, because they already have some emotional discontrol issues, already is a part of their temperament or part of their personality. When these predispositions are already there, they find game as a outlet for expression of these emotions, because game provides a free platform. Games provide them to express themselves the way they want. So sometime when they become repeated expression of this emotion happen through game, it start getting expressed in offline setting also. And since gaming is a leisure activities, gaming is a pleasurable activity, gaming is the activity which they prefer. If there is a restriction from the parents, so as we go, it causes frustration because they feel they are not allowing me to enjoy what I want. And that frustration again leads to expression of irritability towards at the individual level as well as toward the parents also. So it means what parents can do is to work on communication. What we are saying, good quality time and good communication is not coming up in the family context. And child feel that I'm getting advice, I'm getting directions, but I'm not getting the leisure, which I'm getting through gaming platforms. So I think it will be a challenge, but if the family works on communication, good quality time, and relaxation, definitely it will affects it will reduce the frequency of expression of anger. But still, if you find that anger expression is another comorbid psychological issue in your child or in your adult, then definitely seek professional help so that they can be managed through other individual works also.
Thank you, Doctor, once again for helping us understand communication and quality time is the key for effective parenting. A question which is related to this again, can you explain the difference between technology use and addiction? When should parents or students seek help? Thank you, Doctor.
I would say because there is a term called recreational use. Recreational use uh, can be there for XYZ online activities. But if this recreational use builds up like a preoccupation, the first thing, preoccupation with use of technology. Like you always looks for opportunity to go back to technology use, or you feel get distracted because of use of technology, that preoccupation becomes significant and you are not able to manage it. So that's the first sign. Second is loss of control. Or whenever you start your use of technology, are you able to log out at certain period of time? Or do you feel that once I start, I don't know how many hours it goes, it's very difficult to control. And which happens like when you are in this watching any series, if you are in any kind of game and other things, sometimes because all series and streaming, they works on psychological states. Because once one particular show gets over, it leaves certain excitement in the end, and you will like to finish that excitement in the next episode. And once the second episode get over, again you build up your that inquisitiveness, curiosity. Let me watch the third show also. So that is all works on artificial intelligence, so that they will keep you remain interested. But you have to plan that if you are watching episode, take a break after each episode, do certain other activities, because that break will allow you to maybe feel distracted and do other things. So one is third, second is loss of control. Third is because of preoccupation and loss of control, are you facing dysfunction in your lifestyle? Dysfunction can be biological, dysfunction can be social, dysfunction can be physical, or dysfunction in other domain. So you are continuous your use of technology despite knowledge of dysfunction, that becomes the third criteria. So preoccupation, loss of control, and use despite knowledge of dysfunction. If these three things are coming up in adult or in children's, then we can say that definitely it's not no longer recreational, it is moving towards problematic or addictive use. But here I also again want to identify, majority of the population would be in problematic zone. Addictive zone is less than 5% of out of 100. So I think most of the children would be in problematic, but sometimes parents use the label that you are addict. Child feel very offended that how can I be addict? So I think better use the terminology that they are developing excessive or problematic use and which require further attention.
Thank you, Doctor, once again for that useful tips and the yardsticks of preoccupation, ability to control, and any dysfunctional onsets identified. Thank you, Doctor. Here goes another question. Are there any particular type of games which have high addictive component?
One thing definitely, I think if children are playing any kind of role play games, which is like PUBG or battle arena games like Dota 2 and Counter Strikes. So what happens? All these games are involve a lot of actions. It involves a lot of involvement, and it's all are team games where they play with their teams or with their players, and which brings a lot of excitement. And each games also brings them grades, each games also bring them rank. So these kind of reward also keep them to play games, and which also contribute to excessive use of game. But I would say it's not game, it's like a characteristics of host and environment we have to see. Maybe I think we have to see it's an interaction between the game and the psychological predisposition of the gamer. If child is using sometime for excitement, child is using as a part of coping, or child is using that I can do very well, it's my career. There are so initially too, where I'm saying it is a part of coping, it's part of novelty, it's a concern. But sometimes there are e-sport is another term, because most of these games, role play and battle arena, these are a part of e-sports also. And childs have argument that e-sports is a very good career option in the Western world. Why can't, and India is also, it is picking up, but India opportunities are not very significant. So sometimes we have to sit with the child, listen to his perspective and guide him that he should have a balance rather than spending too much time on these activities. But e-sport is an emerging career options where most of the children wants to go for it.
Thank you, Doctor. We have a few more questions. I hope we can take a few.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, thank you, Doctor. This is how to reduce the negative risk of current technology on the health of our children. What ways can you monitor a child's technology use without invading privacy?
It's like a very big question, and most of the parents wants to know, but most of the parents have already installed apps and other things so that they can monitor the child uses. So one, I think if you plan any monitoring use of any technology, discuss with the child, let him understand the relevance. So that I think once the child consent is there into the decision making process, he will also have a control, and he will also feel accountable that I have to work on it. Second thing, I would say increase quality time. I think that's what we always prefer, increase quality time with the child. Engage him in physical activities, engaging him in other activities, so that he has started enjoying that reciprocal interaction in the family context rather than going into the online world for acknowledgement. Because what we have seen, children prefers to go online because they feel the acknowledgement is very high in online world. Once they send any message on social media, acknowledgement is within a minute you will get 100 acknowledgement. If they send any WhatsApp message, again it's comes. So I think that acknowledgement need we have to fulfill in the family context, and they definitely require some sort of restructuring, which is a difficult task but not impossible. So if these two things are happens, I think definitely parents don't have to do any advisory things to bring the reduction in the child's technology use. And I think parents should also build up a rule, because one of the child says that you are advising me to control, but you are not having a session with my parents who always use technology in front of me. Or sometimes child says that my elder brother has a more relaxation, but they're very strict about me. So I think that sort of balancing should be done at the family level.
Thank you, Doctor, for that valid point. We live by examples. As parents, we need to be the significant adults needs to be the role model, displaying what is being expected from the children. Yeah, accountability and quality time. That's few points noted. Thank you, Doctor. The next question is CBT effective in treating internet gaming among adolescents? What is a simple behavior technique can be used by parents and teachers?
Yes, CBT is effective actually in treating internet addictive use, gaming use, and problematic social networking sites use in adolescents and young adults. So as I said, first is self-awareness. To put it across very, very, very simply, first is self-awareness. And self-awareness will only come once they actually are aware of the different phenomena which are actually happening because of the use of technology. So whenever we download an app, we only know the pros of it, means the advantages of that particular app. We never educate ourselves. I would not want to say that we should not focus only on the child, as Dr. Manoj has already indicated. Parents also should get educated first. When they are consuming something, I would say it is digital consumption. You are downloading an app or a set of apps or social networking apps or gaming apps or anything else onto the system or onto the tablet. First, we need to become aware about it, not only about advantages, but what are the likely risks which that particular app has. But as of now, we need to become aware. Though it will take some amount of effort, but we need to become aware. So self-awareness is one. What are the existing phenomena which are there, which use of technology can bring in? We need to be aware about that. Once awareness comes in, then is the point of evaluation of self or evaluation of the home environment or the family environment. As I indicated, what are the online behaviors the child is engaging in, and what are the online behaviors the parents are engaging in, because observational learning is the key. And third is then also observe what are the offline behaviors, what are the offline behaviors which the child engages in, what's the kind of pattern they have. Once this is there, the third will be, I would say, acknowledgement about the excessive use. And then fourth would be trying to basically accept that the change needs to be there. I think once this awareness comes and acknowledgement occurs, then and you need to basically collaborate with the child so that he agrees to it. It should not be that it has been shared by the parent and they need to make the change. So you have to make them a partner in this collaboration to change, bring in a positive change and engage in developing newer behaviors. So once this is done, then those other behaviors about the healthy use of internet, which I had actually brought in out during the presentation, if those can be used, if those can be suggested, but at the same time, parents need to also have a healthy use pattern of internet use or gadgets, which the child will learn through observational learning. So these things I think are very crucial for it to get manifested.
And I think I would also add 3R approach which parents can learn. One is recognize signs of addiction, recognize signs of excessive use, which we already talked about, preoccupation, loss of control, and use despite knowledge of harm. Second is relevance. Tell the child in a more non-judgmental way why it is relevant to bring a balance. So that should become like a family practice or communication. And the last is repetition, because child may not learn from your first advice. Child may needs repeated advice, repeated communication. The third would be R. Keeps repeating these messages, keep repeating this communication within the family context, so that everybody in the family pick up these habits of digital hygiene and pick up the habit of healthy use of technology.
Thank you, Dr. Nitin and Dr. Sharma, for helping us understand in a detailed manner and explaining the importance of being the role model, negotiating, and collaboration with the child.
I think I would cite one example, because one family, we gave a task that why don't we spend 1 hour together and have a quality time. So after a week, the same family came back to me and they said that we spared 1 hour and we didn't use technology. But we also faced problem what to do in this 1 hour. We don't know how to communicate and what to discuss. So I think that is a challenge. I think the families somewhere are losing out those verbal and non-verbal cues or the other things to communicate, to spend good quality time with each other company. So I think that's why we are emphasizing this whole need that it is not child problem, it is a public health issues where environment also has to change, family also has to work, and the child also has to work for healthy use of technology.
Thank you, Doctor. There's another question which is like, I would like to ask a question, how to avoid procrastination is the question.
Dr. Nitin can go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, there are many ways. So the example which we give here is that we have to do our work in bits and pieces. So there could be many ways of how procrastination could be avoided. There are no short tips to do that, but we need to go ahead and see what are the underlying reasons for avoidance actually. So we need to understand first as a step one, what are the reasons which we are engaging in avoidance, which causes us procrastination. Second thing is how can we break down the task depending on what the task is. If we can break it down into small chunks of work and then try to see which of that can be done in a prioritized manner and reprioritize that order of the tasks which are remaining to be done. So maybe you can start with a task which is you're not, after you've broken it down, start with a task which is not really difficult for you to start with. And I think in that order, if you go ahead, I think you will be able to do it. So these are some of the simple ways you can do it, but we need to do a proper evaluation of what are the underlying reasons for the procrastination behavior and how it is get facilitated by using technology as a distraction strategy.
But technology is the commonest reason for procrastination. So I think definitely all of us have to work on technology, and rest of the factors we can identify at individual level.
Thank you, doctors, for that wonderful explanation. And each one of us needs to identify if at all procrastination is an issue. We need to identify the underlying reason behind it and also the tips of breaking down the task in hand and then managing it. Thank you, doctors. There's one more question which has come up in the chat box. How to deal with anxiety-related issues when it comes to work from home? It involves screen time more than 12 hours a day.
Nitin, you can answer.
No, sir, please go ahead. I'll contribute.
Better you answer.
Okay. I think you have to understand again, as we said, what are the reasons for the anxiety which are emerging? Okay, is it to do with fatigue? Is there, or there's a concept of digital burnout in which we have recently published a paper that if they spend nearly more than say 10 hours in a day face to face with the screen, then what kind of physical symptoms could be there? What kind of other fatigue symptoms can set in? Whether attention can decrease, whether problem solving skills can go down, whether decision making abilities go down with excessive amount of exposure to the screen, and ultimately over a period of time, maybe a week or few days of time, with this repetitive cycle where there is absence of offline activities, they develop what we call as digital burnout. And once this digital burnout steps in, I guess the other taking up another day after you have experienced it, going ahead with another day of work, then it makes you extremely anxious because when you are not sure how you will be able to cope up with another day of exhaustion, how you'll be able to cope with another day where you have to actually be sure, ensure that you are actually having efficient amount of work. So that is the time when you need to recognize that possibly excessive use of technology, even though in a productive manner, is taking place. And therein where you need to decide, you need to have frequent breaks from the screen. You need to basically take frequent time offs where you can do some physical activity in between the short activities during the work time, if that is possible. Try and see if you can schedule offline activities in between the work schedules, and try and see if you can communicate with your colleagues or with your supervisors at work about the long working hours. If primarily that are causing, leading to the fatigue, which ultimately can make you more anxious for moving into the next day with work.
Thank you, Doctor, for the valuable inputs. With this, we have come to the end of the webinar and it's time for gratitude. Meanwhile, I request the participants to fill the feedback form so that it will be of great help for us to review the session and do further better ones in the future. It's time for gratitude now. In ordinary life, we hardly realize that we receive a great deal more than we give. And that is only with gratitude, life becomes rich. With that, on behalf of Samagra, I take this opportunity to thank Dr. Manoj Kumar Sharma and Dr. Nitin Anand for this enriching session. I thank our Provincial Reverend Father Dionysius Vaz and Reverend Father Brian Pereira for giving us this platform and for their constant guidance and encouragement. A sincere gratitude to Dr. Matthew Verghese for his support through the series of the webinar. Thanking Almighty for the blessings and keeping us healthy and safe. Thank you, dear participants. Take care and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.